do with skills. So we've managed to hire 2 graduate ecologists to try to build the community of ecology knowledge in Huntingdonshire. It's becoming a role that's really hard to fill. Ecologists all across the country, their salaries are increasing as everyone needs an ecologist to help them. And we think it's really important that there are local Huntingdonshire people who are being trained in that skill. Also, we've seen the opening of a new retrofit skills college training center in St. Ives just a few weeks ago. And so that is, a local place where people can learn to become the heat pump installers of the future, the solar panels installers of the future. So again, trying to make sure that not only do we have enough skilled workers to do what we need to do in the transition, but that they live right here in Huntingdonshire and they can learn their trade right here. So finally, I would say after 1 year, our council has achievements to celebrate, but we can't become complacent. Global temperatures are still rising and extreme weather events continue to endanger residents across Huntingdonshire. Despite the daunting challenges ahead, our council and local people will work together and recover Huntingdonshire's ecology and also play our part in tackling climate change. So now I'm going to pass over to Harriet and let her talk through some of our progress since we declared a climate emergency.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davenport-Ray, and good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, so thank you very much. Councillor Davenport-Ray has touched on her statement already, so I'll just skip past this bit for the moment. And just to go through what I'm going to speak to you tonight about, I'm going to give you an overview of where we are so far with our climate strategy and priorities. We're going to cover the financial year progress from 2023 to 2024, key achievements, and most importantly, what's next. So to introduce you to your core climate team, we have Ellie, our Energy and Sustainability Officer, Councillor Davenport-Ray, who you know, Helen, who you know is your Development and Delivery Manager, myself, who's just come on board, Neil, our Assistant Director, and Amber, who we'll be hearing from later, who's our Home Energy Reduction Officer. It's really important to emphasise that whilst this is your core climate team, your true climate team is the entire council. It's all of us. We all have a vested interest in bringing this net zero goal home. So I really wanted to bring that across with some of the work that our facilities team have been doing, our fleet team have been doing, our home energy team have been doing, our EV team have been doing. It's really a core effort. So there should be more people on that slide. To talk about climate strategy and priorities, you formally recognised the climate crisis back in 2023 and adopted the Climate Strategy and Action Plan, which we are now rolling out with gusto. So we're a positive example to others. We've been planting trees, we've been making changes to council buildings by looking at where the biggest energy outputs are. We've been an enabler, we've sought funding to improve our own buildings, and we're working with our own partners and external partners to improve our infrastructure. And we're an encourager as well. We're sharing guidance. You've all got a little card just next to you about our newly launched online climate hub, which is an area to pick up information and see what our communities are doing around the district. You're all aware of what our corporate plan priorities are, but just to re-emphasise those again, we're all here to improve quality of life for local people, to create a better Huntingdonshire for our future generations, and to deliver the good quality, high value for money services with good control and compliance, alongside aligning with our statutory obligations as well. If I draw your attention to your council key priorities, so they are to decarbonise the fleet, reduce energy use and shift to renewables, and to procure wisely. And to shine a spotlight on those 3 key things especially. So if we look at the left-hand side, our facilities, that is, we've been awarded 700,000 by Sports England to install solar panels and build some electric charging at our One Leisure site in St. Ives. We've completed some decarbonisation works in Pathfinder House, and we've installed some LED lighting in Eastfield House as well. The facilities strategy has also been developed in collaboration with local partnerships, and that's looking to be rolled out in the coming months. Our hero topic, possibly, our fleet HVO trial. This has been in a partnership alongside the police and fire service, as well as within our own, as well as within house. And already in partnership with police and fire, we managed to reduce carbon output by 72 tonnes. And just to put that in perspective, that's the equivalent of 8.6 million smartphones being charged. So that's a lot of smartphones. And our key piece, which Councillor Davenport-Ray mentioned earlier, was our work to develop a sustainable procurement programme and toolkit. This is going to focus on examining effective ways to drive reductions to supply chain emissions, and those sessions have begun. We need to establish the training first before we could properly roll that out. So there is a slight delay there, but it's one that we're very much aware of and looking to roll out properly in the coming quarters. This is a very busy slide, but this one, within the corporate plan and carbon emissions especially, these are the key things that we want to focus on and achieve over the coming months. So I won't dwell too much on that slide, so we've covered a few of that already. This is our shining beacon, as I mentioned. And again, I won't go into everything on this slide, but I want to re-emphasise again that partnership and the potential that we'll offer in order for us to be not only an enabler, but an influencer as well. What we've achieved so far by reducing carbon emissions by 72 tonnes is phenomenal. And this, our trial within House is due to finish on the 15th of June. So there'll be some more information coming for you towards the end of June, early July. Yes, certainly.
So I know that you'll be really interested in the results from this, but also perhaps the financial implications. So the next thing that you will see coming through the committee process is a summary of the results and then some options that will be presented to Cabinet that we'd like to have your feedback into. Those options might be, we carry on as we were before, using diesel. We use HVO. We use hydrotreated vegetable oil. We use some combination. And there will be price tags along with all of those three. So watch for that. I'm thinking probably in September or October that would come through this committee so you can see the results and help us decide what we're going to do next.
Thank you. So to give you a look at our total greenhouse gas emissions, this is old data. We're working on the new financial year data for 2023, 2024. So by the time September, October rolls around, this graph will look slightly differently with hopefully a much smaller bar on the right-hand side. But in terms of the amount of carbon we've saved so far, 692 tonnes of CO2 saved, which is the equivalent of heating 7,600 refrigerators. So again, quite a lot of refrigerators there. And 18.86% is the reduction of the total carbon emissions from March 2020 through to March 2023. Neil, could I borrow you to just talk through this slide, if that's okay, in more detail?
So you will recall when we did the climate strategy, we worked with local partnerships, and local partnerships created the carbon calculator for local government. So what they did as part of that strategy is baseline our carbon emissions and then create that trajectory. So there's a straight line trajectory there, the red line, to our target as a council of 2040. The green line is the plotted line based on what we're doing. And so it's based on our actions to date, to the point in date, and then beyond that, it's our anticipated actions moving forward. And you'll notice that obviously there is an impact on fleet. We've talked about HVO, but there's a lot of unknown technology at the moment in terms of moving forward. It's being developed. There's talk again of hydrogen at the moment. We know that electricity for HGVs isn't that practical at the moment. If you're in a city, there's been a number of trials, but I think there's been mixed results depending upon what's there. And it's a huge investment in electrical freighters, and given that we use the kit across a rural district, we're less likely to be early adopters of that kind of technology. So based on that, we're doing really well at the moment. You can see that we're under our trajectory based on the work that we're doing, and our best anticipated guess at the moment based on technology changing and the point at which we'd switch our fleet are displayed there, those key points. We're continuing to work on that. So there are plans that obviously Harriet will refer to and things that are happening, which will continue. But the decision about HVO, for example, will make a difference to that trajectory. And that's some of the choices that the council's going to have to make. But we will keep tracking our progress. As you can see there, we're the red, sort of the red dot with a white cross in it, which shows that we're absolutely on track based on what we're doing so far.
So at this point, I would jump back to one of my comments from the start. So as we approach 2040, every decision we make will become more painful, both more painful to do and painful to pay for. And so you can see even in the green route that's been mapped out for us, there will likely be years where we don't meet the linear reduction trend, the red dotted line. We won't reduce our carbon emissions by the same amount every year. And I think we have to be prepared that we won't always hit our targets every year. But as long as we keep moving in the right direction towards operational net zero by 2040, I think we should consider that well done.
Thank you very much. Our next slide just focuses on home energy, which Amber's going to talk to you about in more detail later on. But just to highlight some of the key things that's gone on within this team over the last few months. Key events have been held back in January. There was one at Cambridgeshire Libraries involving the Citizens' Advice and PECT. There was some intertwining and will be some intertwining between the climate teams and home energy as retrofitting goes on within house, as well as promoting it outside as well to see what residents within the district can do to retrofit their homes and make them more sustainable and economical. And there's our own climate strategy as well, which has set out our key action plans and points within that to roll out. At the last annual climate conversation in November, there are some key points that you asked for. So this is a you said, we did slide. And you asked for a central place to access content concerning not only HDC's work on climate, but within Huntingdonshire's community as well, and what it's doing to tackle climate change. So we've launched our online climate hub. It's a great resource. Lots of key things on there, lots of activities that our community is doing to help tackle climate change within our district. And that was launched just last month in May. We had our environmental hub in conjunction with our place strategy, which was held on the 4th of June. And the aim of that was to develop a steering group, our community driving change towards helping us achieve net zero, not only within house for HDC, but also Huntingdonshire as a whole. Two different things there. This morning I attended a workshop held by Cambridgeshire County Council in Cambridge, which is leading on the CAN Fund locally determined contribution workshop to look at changing policy on the ground as issued by national government. We want to do that at a local level to encourage businesses and councils to drive that change towards becoming net zero as set out by the government, the net zero goal 2050 nationally. We've had workshops in libraries already through home energy. We've got more coming up. There's one in October in St Neots. There's an eco fair. And of course, our annual climate conversation, which we're all very welcome to join on the 6th of November, 2024. Mentioned the climate conversation already. That's going to be at Burgess Hall. And to take into account, from what I understand, was a request from yourselves on the committee, a chance to address any queries you have concerning the climate action plan. So we're going to hold a workshop for you at the end of July, the exact date to be decided, for you to come along and ask any queries that you would like to, that may be on your mind, you have concerns about. I'll close there for the moment, but thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, please do feel free.
I'm Catherine Buckball. Thank you. I just had a question about what is like the contingency for if we don't hit by 2040? Like, what are we going to do to...
So our climate strategy sets out our priorities both as a council and for a district. And on the strategy, which is attached as the appendix, there is actually a hierarchy there, and it's very similar to the waste hierarchy. The most important thing we can do and everyone can do is actually reduce their use of energy in the first place, because obviously then you're not dealing with the problem of it in the first place. So this is a journey. There are a number of years. We monitor progress internally as a council on a quarterly basis on all the projects. We will report to you annually on progress, and there will be decisions to make. And I think, as Councillor Davenport-Ray highlighted, some of those decisions will get harder as we go on. However, the march of technology and some of the changes that we're seeing are phenomenal. There is a project that we're working up at the moment, going through the council's ideas process, which is to maximise the solar on our buildings. The payback on that at the moment is 5.5 years. And after that, then we have our own energy when we're not actually getting that electricity from anybody else. And that then is the ultimate goal, isn't it? Now, that's control on our assets, and you can see what we've done on some of those leisure facilities, which were targeted first because they're the most energy-consuming assets we have. So we will continue that work, and we will continue to watch closely in terms of what government policy comes out and those opportunities. But the investment in solar, we know, won't be, there isn't a grant that will do that, unlike some of the other retrofit work that we've done. But we've worked out the business case for that. So that's coming forward, and you will see that coming through this committee in terms of that business investment and whether that's a good return on investment, and that you're happy to support that, because the council will put its own money into that because there isn't another fund. So all I can say is we've got a framework there for decision making, we've got a hierarchy, but we want to avoid carbon offset completely. That's a stated goal in the strategy that was adopted. And interestingly, there's work that might happen that rationalises our waste routes, not necessarily the collection routes, because I can assure you Andy and the team do a lot of work optimising that, because every single moment that one of those vehicles is running is money as well as carbon. But actually, it's the other carbon of that, which is where all the rest of the waste is carted to and for disposal and recycling. So there are a number of bits of work that do that as well. So I hope that reassures you that there's a framework of monitoring, and a bit like everybody, we just have to keep striving and investing and taking those opportunities. We're on trajectory at the moment. We've done pilots, and there'll be options to mainstream those, and the council can make those decisions. And sometimes you have to balance that up against some of the other difficult decisions that as councillors you need to make on priorities. But I think we're in a good position.
Councillor Bywater.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Yeah, great. Some great work going on. We talked about the cross-party working with the police and fire, which is great. It'll be interesting to see how that comes back. Neil, you explained the trajectory, and I just want to understand really. 2040 is a long way in the future, and I'll probably be not even here by then. But I want to understand what the risks are really. If you're going to sort of give us maybe one or two number one risks to keep on that trajectory, what are those risks? What do you think those risks would be if we didn't achieve it? Is it financial? Is it financial risk? Technology? We think technology is going to be great, but thinking and being are two different things. So I'd just like to understand some of the risk of not achieving that really.
So the trajectory that you can see with the green line takes into account the technology that's available today. So if we had unlimited funds and we implemented all of those things all at once, we could go to net zero very quickly. So the number one risk is funding, right? So we know technology will probably increase. And if we had unlimited funding, then we could get to net zero even more quickly. So the number one risk is we don't have the funding to be able to make the changes to be able to get us to net zero. As an organization, that's our greatest risk. I think for local people, the greatest risk is not doing anything. And if we think about the effects of climate change on villages being flooded and extreme heat affecting farming, and the physical effects for local people is the greatest risk for them.
Just before I bring Councillor Alban in, a quick question. First of all, brilliant report. You always produce really good reports. Thank you. Very readable, very easy to digest. Really excited about the hydrogenated vegetable oil. You've started the trial. Have you noticed any flux in prices or when you can't get hold of it? Because obviously the more people find out about it, they may start using it. Just keen to know what you've experienced so far.
I'm actually going to ask Mr. Morley if he'd answer that one.
It's actually good news. So obviously we keep this under regular review when it comes to kind of budgets and planning against that. What we've actually seen over time is the gap between the cost of diesel and the cost of HVO starting to narrow. Wow. So some of those assumptions that we've made about the additional spend it would require have proved to be sort of greater than we anticipate, which is fantastic. But even above and beyond that, that's basically as the market develops and as there's more demand for it. But over and above that, some of the great successes have been the interesting partners in joining us. So we've got fire and police making use of that. Again, we get the economies of scale of that. And one of the things I think as well is just in the benefit of effective long-term planning generally. So some of you might recall during COVID, we had concerns about fuel supply. We bought an additional fuel tank at that point to make sure that there's fuel shortages, we'd be able to manage through that. Obviously, what that means now is you've got one tank for diesel, one tank for HVO, and keeping those things balanced has been really effective. But no, on the whole, prices are falling, and that's really encouraging.
That's really good.
Can I add one piece to that? So the climate strategy is one of the first places where our council started talking about doing things, enabling things, and influencing things. So our Andy and the fleet team started investigating HVO. We have a tank. Can we fill it up with HVO and do a trial? And it was him doing that made the other services realize, oh, maybe we can do a trial too, because he's already done some of the legwork. So us investigating it influenced the blue light services in our area to try to come in on it with us. And because of that, that's part of what will help us in that pricing and improving the cost change moving to HVO.
Thank you. Councillor Orban.
Thank you, Chair. I think HVO, the investigations we're doing under that is some of the most, to me, some of the most exciting and the most interesting things in gaining short-term as well as long-term wins. And Mr. Morley touched on one of the things I was going to ask about, the opportunities to expand the service, larger parish councils that run their own fleet, town councils that run their own fleet, possibly the MOD. And I know we've talked, the Chair and I, yourself and I've talked about working with the MOD, and I think there's some things in the climate change working group we want to bring forward to come up with some ideas. So what possible, there's two questions, one related to that, what alternatives are available out there, what work has already been done to look at expanding the cooperation with other authorities. And the other question is, hopefully we'll get to this point in 2040. What happens when we get to net zero? How can we go even better? Can we be an exporter? What's net zero plus?
So the answer to the first question is, last week, Andy, the fleet manager, and I were involved in a conversation across environmental groups across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, organized by the Combined Authority, sharing his story of working with the police and fire. And so that's the beginning of conversations of how can even more of the partners work together. I think we have to think about the first step first, though. So the paperwork that's going to come through to you in the autumn, we need to document what we've done, document what the costings is, and prove the point with data before we expand out even further. But I think those conversations are already being had. In terms of our climate trajectory, I would love to be a net negative carbon council. That's a fantastic idea. I'll quote you on it later, I'm sure. What will we do at that point? I think at that point, we could be looking at, if we're creating more electricity than we use, we could think about where that might be going and how that might be monetized. I think innovative income streams is the word I would use, but I think that we're quite far off from that, and we have a lot of challenges to accomplish before then.
Councillor Orban.
Thanks. That's reassuring. I think without getting too excited and rushing into things, it's good to look at things in perspective. I mean, I was thinking as the presentation was going on, if we've got a tank of HVO, it's not cost effective or environmentally friendly certainly it's for argument's sake, to drive over here to fill up. But I'm glad that's being thought of, because sometimes things look exciting, but it's the unintended consequences. So I'm glad that's being looked at, and please do quote me on. I'd love to get to a position that the next generations that will follow us can be in a good position on the climate.
I think the other thing to mention is also how this links with the commerciality of the council, and thinking about that, because there are opportunities where we might act as a buying agent if we're ahead of something and facilitating it, because the lorry that delivers it can deliver it to multiple places. It's not readily accessible fuel at the fuel pump, so there's solutions around that, aren't there? But the most important thing I would say is that part of the reason why we've done the trial is to check that it doesn't impact the vehicles. It doesn't impact the servicing. And obviously that's business critical for us, because a freighter off the road is very, very expensive for many, many reasons. The recovery costs, the impact on our residents, it's a service everyone takes for granted until obviously it doesn't happen, and you know how important that is. Well, actually a lot of the work isn't just that the vehicle's running, it's that it's running consistently and that they've maintained it. Our workshop are doing that. And I think we have to remind people that it is our staff and our people doing that work. We're liaising with the people that support the fire service in servicing their vehicles, and the police that are servicing their vehicles. So that collaboration is really important, because obviously we can then de-risk some of that for some of those smaller organisations that might say, well, we want to make it, but we're going to need a bit of support to just make sure that the servicing is appropriate for those vehicles, given that you've shifted the fuel. So the reason why the trial is so important is that all of those things have been exhaustively looked at with Andy and the team. And so it's the whole suite of product that we could then enable to provide that as a package. But the one thing I will say about HVO is it is recognised as a transition fuel and not the end point for vehicles. So we have to be mindful that it's really useful now, and it's a stepping stone. But actually there will be other things we will need to look at in the future for it to be truly sustainable, because it is a transition. It's recognised as a transition fuel for certain types of vehicle. But the thing is, with the workshop feedback, it's been absolutely brilliant. They themselves have been delighted with the results.
I wasn't expecting the question that was thrown to me earlier, but I've got the numbers in front of me, which I thought might illustrate the point in terms of the HVO prices. So in December 22, the variance price between a litre of diesel and a litre of HVO was just over 60 pence a litre difference. So we were paying a 60 pence premium, or would have been if we'd been using HVO at this time. It's dropped steadily over the period till in April 24. The difference was just under 18 pence a litre differential, which I think is showing how the market's developing. But I think Neil's point's absolutely critical about, by our innovative use, we've positioned ourselves really well to work and on-sell to other people. And the expertise we're building up in the workshop and those kind of things are leading on to questions, not just about the supply of HVO, but potentially about servicing other people's fleet, about using that expertise, about building that capacity. And all of that money comes back to us. And Neil didn't say it, but I think implicit in your question, Councillor Alban, about could we ever get to a position where we're in a net sink for carbon, or not just neutral but better than that. I think it's an example a bit like biodiversity that came to this panel recently, where we're really making a market, we're being innovative, we've got that kind of first mover advantage. And I think there are opportunities through the work that Neil and the team are doing, potentially where we're using funding that's coming from the private sector to boost our kind of biodiversity and carbon sink opportunities. And we're, Huntingdonshire residents are benefiting, but we're not paying because we've established that expertise. So I think it's one of those number of areas where I think, we really are at the cutting edge of some of this stuff.
This is all very positive, but I need to draw us back to, if you remember from the climate strategy, this hierarchy. So our last choice should be offset. Next up is sequester. Third from bottom is substitute. HVO is a substitute. I'm not entirely excited about being able to replace the fleet with HVO fuel. I would be very excited if we didn't need to collect waste from any households, because that would mean we hadn't created it and we'd remove the problem altogether. So it is really good news, but even once we have the substitute, as the technology evolved, we will need to move to something else as well, and it could be a lot more expensive than the good news we've had on the finances on HVO. So it's a really good step on the way forward. It's really going to help our carbon trajectory, but we'll still have difficult decisions in the future.
Councillor Orban.
Thanks. I think one of the things that came up during the EV working group is what is our role as a district council? And I know it's come up this evening, and I don't want to see us become running HDC fuel stations, selling HVO. But it's one of the things we've looked at as what is our role as a district council in providing EV charging points, and how does that fit in with the private sector? And I think one of the things that, through you, Chair, you've mentioned, Councillor Davenport-Ray, is technology moves on, and the provision of HVO or other fuels may change, and we've seen the way just going to fill up with fuel, the way petrol and diesel pumps change, and there's so much more availability of EV charging points. And I think they'll be changing in electric vehicles that might become more affordable. So it's just, as long as we're aware, and it sounds like we are, that we're watching for trends and watching for development of technology, and that we're not, as Mr. Sloper said, we're not stuck in a particular way thinking this is the new thing. It's this holistic approach, and I think cautiously we're in the right place.
Can I just say that we have invited electric lorries to test that we've had at our site. I've ridden in some of them. Some of the crews have gone out and trialed them on some of our routes. So our fleet manager definitely has his eye on the horizon of what technology is available, and we'll know very quickly when there is something out there suitable for our rural routes.
Just a quick one from me. Do we have an update on how the fleet are coping with the hydrogenated vegetable oil? Any issues that they're picking up? None. Good. Neil.
I was just going to say, by the end of this year, there will actually be a fleet strategy as well. But we needed to finish the HVO trial first before they put that. And then that will be another document like the climate strategy that will need a refresh. But that will enable sort of the fleet and sort of that fleet replacement program to take an informed view moving forward. Because, as you said, if we replaced everything with an electric vehicle right now, be a huge capital cost, and we've got embedded carbon in every vehicle that we run currently. So there's an argument that has to be looked at in terms of that capital asset, the value of that, the depreciation of it, and that shift. So that will be covered in that strategy, but that won't come until sort of Q4, just because we need the decision on HVO first.
Has anyone got any other questions or comments on this item? Councillor Mockball.
Mine's on solar panels. I just wanted to ask if any of our bus stops have solar panels, and or if they don't, then are we planning on putting solar panels on our bus stops?
Bus stops are an interesting topic in Huntingdonshire, because there's about 5 different owners depending upon what the bus stop is and who's running the bus service. So there isn't a straightforward answer, I'm afraid, Councillor, to that question. The County Council are very keen to look at it. The purpose would be why and where would the energy go. So for self-powered lighting, for safety and security, where there's an opportunity, that will probably be explored, yes. We're actually investigating solar canopies as part of the work that we're looking at for our leisure sites. And we've even been discussing with the police in terms of some of their trials for that, and where there might be co-use for things. But we also then have to start looking at battery storage of the electricity, etc. One of the biggest constraints that we have on electricity nationwide is putting it back into the grid. But the council is involved and an active partner in the local area energy plan, which will come to the next committee, which is basically us working out in Cambridgeshire our electricity needs for the future based on our future needs of the population, what that might look like, and how we're working with the national grid to get that forward plan. And that's something that then the planners use as a tool as well in terms of forward planning for new development, because that infrastructure has to be planned in. So we're an active partner and we are a contributor to that with the county council and the combined authority so that we get the very best for Huntingdonshire.
Any other questions or comments? In that case, thank you so much for your presentation, Harriet. It was brilliant. And again, thank you for the report. It was really well written, extremely easy to read. Thank you. So moving on to item 5, the electric vehicle charging in Huntingdonshire. There's another presentation from George. Thank you.
A few months ago, we brought to you the public EV charging strategy, which the Cabinet then approved. This is an update sort of on the first use of funding within those guidelines that are in the strategy. Some of you who are in the climate working group have visited some of the sites that we're going to talk about where EV charging could be installed. And so I think George and Jasmine are going to mention not just those sites, but a few more that we might be able to scope in the near future.
Just going to quickly mention we are on the wrong slides initially, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah. Could we have the slides that are called EV charging in Huntingdonshire? Unless you want to wing it.
I was going to say I could hazard a guess, but we'll go. Evening, councillors. So tonight we're providing an update on EV charging in Huntingdonshire. So as you recall, recently we brought through a report in March which talked about the role of Huntingdon District Council in electric vehicle charging. Now, this is a piece of work, this specific piece of work that sits under the Rural England Prosperity Fund programme, which is reported separately. However, given member interest in this piece of work, we have brought it to this, given our recent updates. So EV charging in Huntingdonshire, as we recall recently, we have seen significant growth in EV charging and the number of electric vehicles in our district. Informed by the climate strategy, we decided that we would be an enabler and we'd seek partnerships and funding to enhance our electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The Council's Climate Action Plan set out to develop an EV strategy for Huntingdonshire, and our working group, when we were developing the EV strategy, looked at the Council's role and set out what the Council would do, which includes utilising external funding to support rural EV off-street provision in proximity to local amenities. So a bit about this funding is, the background is, it's a piece of funding that was applied for by the CPCA and has been successfully apparted by Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. And it's the Rural England Prosperity Funding, so REP funding. The allocation is to help the wider community and local authority area to support this specific piece, access to rural EV charging. So we have to deliver under the grant funding a minimum of 6 new charging points across 2 locations. Grant allocation is £250,000 and we have quite a short time frame to do this. So we have to deliver, install, and they have to go live before the 31st of March of the coming year. So the scope of the project will be to deliver rural community infrastructure to support EV charging, and as I say, through a minimum of 6 charging points. We have to provide an increased number of charging locations, and we have to support the use of community facilities. Part of what we've had to look at is what the definition of a rural area is. So we've taken examples from the REP prospectus, so populations of less than 10,000, or in wider market, countryside market or hub towns with large populations. Part of this piece of work as well is that we're not limited to only delivering 2 locations and 6 charge points. We can push as much as we can within that grant allocation. So as a piece of work, we'll be doing this as a phased approach in delivery. The main aim for us is to make sure we secure the grant funding and meet the deliverables of the grant funding. So as you recall from the EV strategy, we did a piece of work with some of the parish councils where we looked at their sites to understand the challenges that would be faced by parishes. This included challenges such as the general powers of competence, and we also did a bit of work with a number of parishes engaging. What we are progressing under Tranche 1 is the 5 parish councils that interacted with us in that EV strategy development. So Sawtrey, Holywelcome, Needingworth, Gratham, Yaxley and Fenstanton are all being taken through on Tranche 1. So what that means is they will be the primary sites that we are going to look at to initially scope and meet the minimum grant application, the grant requirements that we can. With the remaining funding, we'll then look at a Tranche 2 and 3. So Tranche 2 will be a quick review of HDC sites to see if we've got anything in rural locations. Again, it has to meet the feasibility flow that was set out on the right of the slide. So is it an area with a higher population that doesn't currently have EV charging? So we'll be looking by parish area at the highest populations and cross-referencing that the parishes. We'll be looking at this to see whether it's an area with assets of community value and whether these assets of community value have linked off-street parking that can support both residents with no off-street overnight parking, but also not monopolise the facility. So if something has a limited space, say 2 or 3 spaces, it wouldn't be an ideal space for us to, again, it was a challenge that was brought up in the EV strategy to allocate all of that as EV parking. We don't want to monopolise the site. So Tranche 2 will be our own sites. Have we got anything suitable? And then Tranche 3, we will progress that again with a call out wider into the parishes like we did in the EV strategy to say, we have found a site. We will look at the population sizes, we will look at assets community value, and then we will proactively reach out and see if anyone is interested in working with us. So the aim of this is to make sure that we fully utilise the available grant funding and to put as much asset and as much asset as we can into the community for community access.
Can I ask something? I'm wondering, we have 5 sites in Tranche 1. Some of us have visited some of those sites. Can you and Jasmine describe to us what do those 5 sites look like? What are the types of things that we will be installing and where?
Absolutely, thank you. So, for example, Holywelcome Needingworth have actually presented 2 sites to us. One of them is a site which is near a sports playing field, so on the outskirts of the town. It is a larger car parking space. Again, so putting an EV provision in there wouldn't negatively impact other users of the site. Again, picking on their other site there as well. It is next to the Pavilion building, we'll call it Pavilion. And again, it's a community central space in the village. Thinking of Yaxley is at their, gonna get the wrong name?
It's like a hall, but they have lots of clubs and things like that. There's lots going on there. And there's also a big field next door where they have loads going on. So yeah, that's a really, really good site as well. But that one it's smaller, much smaller than the first site that Millfield in Needingworth. So they're the things that we have to consider in what we install, because if we take out 2 parking bays on that site, it might be questionable. So yeah, that's a smaller site, that one.
But again, all the sites that we're looking at, they are sites that are part of the community infrastructure, we'll call it, within the towns or within the parishes. So as we move on to those, so again, how we link this back to our strategies, the council's role in public EV charging is set out what the council will do. So one of the things we set out to do was to utilise external funding to support rural off-street provision in proximity to local amenities. So this really matches up with the strategy that we adopted in March. And again, we will look to support parishes who lack the general powers of competence required to operate a charge point by us acting as a third-party charge operator. So in line with our strategy specification, again, we'll look at the principles set out. We will look to achieve a minimum standard of 7 kilowatt charging. Again, it'll always be subject to the site constraints and limitations. And we'll also consider the average dwell time of sites. So some of these sites may have a quicker turnover, so we'll try and install a more rapid provision, or if they are used for longer periods of time, again, that will influence the decision. It does ultimately come back to what is the provision on site, and is the benefit disproportionate? It may be that we have to uplift the site's incoming supply, and that impacts what we're able to do elsewhere. Again, linking into our corporate plan as well. This links into the council's corporate plan's priority number 2, so creating a better Huntingdonshire for future generations. Again, it's one of our action plan actions. Action 47 says that we will enable through delivery of a phase 1 rural EV charging as set out in a strategy. So this is a crucial piece of work that does meet the council's corporate objectives as well. Looking at the actual delivery as well, we have got the funding and the funding is in place. So we're going to focus on maximising the available funding. We'll undertake the installation of Tranche 1 sites using existing supply unless we're confident it will not impact the delivery of the overall project. Again, working with the energy networks, we have got a limited of time to deliver these. It could take months to go ahead and actually uplift the site's incoming supply. If that will impact our overall deliverable and whether we can achieve this within the timeframes, we are using external funding. It may limit our ability. So we will look to try and make sure that we confidently deliver everything within the timeframe of the grant funding. Again, we're looking to support parish councils without GCP through appropriate agreements. And then we'll mainly focus on progressing sites where non-complex arrangements can be made. So we've already begun the piece of work to look at these parish sites, the 6 parish sites under the 5 parishes, to understand land ownership and make sure there's nothing more complex to overcome in that in case there's anything that will prohibit us from doing that. So there's 2 operational scenarios. One of them is that we'll work with the charge point supplier and the parish council. We can fund the equipment and the installation, and then the parish may own and operate the charge point themselves. That's where a parish council has the general powers of competence in place. If a parish council does not, that is where we have to be careful about the non-complex arrangements. We will look to put an agreement in place so that we have a right to use that piece of land with the parish. We can then install the charge point and operate the charge point where they don't have the power to do so. We've put a brief overview of the risks again in this. The council does manage its projects and we will be managing the project in accordance with our project management process. There is a full risk record that we'll be going along with this. This is just to highlight a couple of the top level risks. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but it's just to show that we are confident in what we are doing. We have thought about the risks and we've thought of mitigations as well to make sure that we can overcome it and not impact delivery. And then timescales is the key one for us now. So we need to make sure we deliver the scope of the grant and we need to make sure we do it within the allocated time frame. So we are progressing already the Tranche 1 and 2 sites, and we are already looking at the land works in place behind that to understand the arrangements that need to be made. By August, we hope to go ahead and review the costings for installation at those initial sites, which will give us a balance out of that £250,000 allocation to understand how much we have left to work into Tranche 2 and to Tranche 3. Again, in September, October, we'll be commencing the Tranche 1 works. And again, if with that available funding, we'll start looking at the Tranche 2 feasibility, costings, and having an idea of how much might be left to support Tranche 3. Tranche 3 will then begin initial discussions with the parishes at the same time, or landowners, to understand whether they're interested in that. So November, we can progress to Tranche 2 works, and then we'll begin again with the Tranche 3 estimating budget to start the detailed costings. There's a lot of pieces of the work that will have to overlap in this, but it's just because we have quite tight time scales. So we're trying to manage the actual budget. We don't want to overspend on the budget, but we also want to maximise the spend and what we can deliver. So hopefully this just sets out a bit of the aims that we're going to do. So I'd like to thank you for your time and open to any questions.
I'm just going to add one more point to conclude. So as we move through that timeline that we just talked about, I anticipate that 2 things are probably going to happen. The first is word of mouth. So I'm sure you will hear from parish councils saying, oh, I heard this parish council is having an EV charger. So the parishes are going to notice that this is happening. And so it would be really helpful if you can help us communicate that this is us learning how to do it, and not only learning how to implement it, but preparing for the second thing I anticipate, which is more funding coming forward. And as it does come forward, then we will be in a very good place to have the strategy and know how we're going to implement being able to help more rural communities. So please encourage that word of mouth, but with some caution, just that we're learning along the way and taking some small steps first.
Just going to pick up off the back of that one as well. So County Council are already looking at doing something similar to support rural provision. They have reached out to some of the parishes as well. We are in communication with the County Council officers. They are at the stage where they're looking to scope sites. They haven't got funding in place, so they'll be looking to bid down the line. Because they are aware of our timescales as well, if someone's site is ready to go, we are talking to make sure that we don't lose grant funding and maybe we pick that site first and then they can move more difficult sites into theirs later on. So there is a county piece of work and we are working together on that one.
Well done for securing the grant funding to start with, and it's been so exciting. The working group have been fully involved in this all the way, and it's, as a cross-party working group, it's just been brilliant to see it, and really congratulations how far you're getting. Really glad you got around the powers of competence issues we faced as well. Councillor Bywater, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Good report. Thank you very much. Yeah, just really welcome. Someone who lives and works in a rural community. It's something we're lacking really. So this is great. Thanks for the explanation about risk. I must have got up with a risk hat on today because you've explained it very well. I think delivery of the project, you've got a small window to do this, haven't you? That's quite clear really. So I want to wish you good luck with it and just reach out because I noticed that Saltry and I'm really happy to see that there and I know where it's going, hopefully. If you do need some help from a local perspective from councils, then reach out and ask them as well and I just want to pick up on this crossover with the county council asking for sites because it's frustrating because I've been in some parish council meetings when it's come up on the agenda about, they're offering EV chargers, where can we put it? Because some of the smaller parishes are really struggling for land and ownership of where they can put it. But I think the better and the clearer we can make that, because I think there might be a little bit of confusion of HDC asking for sites and the county council. If we can make that clearer at the earliest opportunity, then, as Lara says, that there will be people going, just down the road, they've had one fitted. We need one as well now. But I think communication as well on top of that will be key to it, really. But yeah, good job. I look forward to seeing them coming. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to pick up on that, during the EV strategy work as well, we did reach out to all the parish councils. So we do, whilst we've got the list of 5 already, there were others that did respond during the EV strategy work. So we already have prior to doing tranche 3 in the community assets, we already have a list of parishes that we know have engaged with us already, and we have got that communication, so that should speed up. Confident on the risk one for the timescale, so thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Motball.
Thank you. My question was about if we reach tranche 3 and we've got loads of funding left, that's brilliant. But if we don't, and there are people who want to put these in, like for example, like a co-op car park, lots of space, but they don't want to, do it themselves. Can we sort of redirect them to CCC, or are we not doing that?
No, that's a very good question. Thank you. Absolutely, we will redirect them to county council. County's piece of work is a longer piece of work, and there are ambitions that will come out in their strategy as well, their strategy work. We will be advising them and signposting them towards county. If someone is eager to join in, that's not an opportunity we want them to miss out on.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much for your presentation, George and Jasmine, and Councillor Davenport-Ray. Really enjoyed hearing it. So moving on to item number 6, the home energy update, which we saw earlier. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
You just have me 3 times this evening. Okay, so first I wanted to introduce you to Amber. So she's our home energy reduction officer. And it was really important to us to have a person in this position because we know there are lots of funding opportunities out there for retrofit. We have lots of residents who are interested, and not very often do the correct residents connect with the correct funding opportunities. And so this was a key opportunity for us to be able to enable and to link up the right people with the right funding opportunities. So I think that's one of the greatest successes of the work that Amber has done so far. There are a few terms I'm going to define for you before we start. So first of all, retrofit in this context isn't just heating. It also includes insulation and glazing of homes so that they require less heating for the people to stay warm. And there's also two terms we like to use a lot in this area. One is called HUG, which means Home Upgrade Grant. So this is a scheme that's for owner-occupiers and private renters living in the worst performing energy efficiency homes who are off gas. So specifically, their home is being heated with oil. So if you have seen me chasing you around with a business card about, please see if any of your residents are on oil and in receipt of benefits, that's what I was talking about there. And then Eco4 is another type of grant. And this has to do with energy efficiency measures for the homes of people struggling to pay their energy bills. And local authorities can refer people, specific households in those conditions who are in fuel poverty for other implementations of things that they can do in their home. One thing I would mention is that the climate conversation we had last November, we paid a lot of attention to what the questions were from residents. And one of the major questions was, we're really interested in retrofit, but we're probably in the category of where we can pay, but we live in a listed building and we're not sure what to do next. So one of the things we're going to try to touch on our climate conversation this November is to find some answers for residents on that one. So that's not something we've been focusing on yet, but we know that that's a key question from lots of our residents. I'll just remind you again that we had the new skills center that opened in St. Ives a few weeks ago. That's going to help a lot in this area because no matter how many grants there are out there to help people retrofit, if there's no skilled labor to do the retrofitting, then it can't be done and the grants can't be spent. So I'm just going to pass you over to Amber and she'll let you know what she's been up to.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for having me here tonight. It's the first time I've ever done anything like this, so please bear with me. Completely new. So I started here just over a year ago now, and initially my role was to administer the HUG2 scheme. It became quickly apparent that there was so much work that needed to be done before we could successfully deliver that scheme in our area. So, thank you. This one, thank you. Okay, so I want to just take it back a few steps to update you on how we came to be home energy here. So initially our funding came from DESNZ, 11.5 million. So that was spread between CERP, which is the Cambridgeshire Energy Retrofit Partnership. So we accessed that funding through CERP. So it aligns nicely with our corporate plan. There's various things I've mentioned in my slide. And so from there we thought, okay, this is HDC home energy. It also aligns nicely with our climate strategy, and I'm fortunate that I get to work really closely with Harriet on this. Okay, so it's all about the journey and improving the quality of life for local people. So this is Neil's bus. I call it Neil's bus because it was requested from Neil that I put the bus in the slides because we have 3 very unique journeys. So how does each resident experience each journey? So we have local person A, which is predominantly funded. They are fortunate enough to be able to do this work for themselves. They may need some signposting, a little bit of guidance. My work mostly focuses on local person B and C. So they're the most vulnerable. Those are the ones that need hand-holding through the process. And I've quite literally held hands through this process. And so talking about our most vulnerable residents, it's really important here to note fuel poverty in the area. So there's a few figures on here, so I'll give you a second to just read it. But it's no surprise that with fuel prices, they've affected everybody. And I think our next round of numbers, I don't think we're going to see these figures improve. I think it's going to get worse. So it's not going to be a problem that's going away. And so with that said, from my experience working alongside our residents, I've noted that most of our vulnerable, especially our elderly, tend to live in older properties. So this is just the stock in our area. So this is all of Huntingdonshire's properties, their ages. So you can see here that aging properties, pre-1900s especially, there's a lot of work to be done there. This is why I think we're now starting to see the emphasis on retrofit. So I just wanted to put a few highlights of what it is I've been doing for this past year. So this is just January to April this year. But we held a coffee morning, which was difficult to organise, but it was really useful as it gave me an opportunity to meet residents that probably need this service the most. People who perhaps don't know where to look, even know how to log onto a computer. It's really important that they have someone guiding them through step by step. And with these schemes, as we all know, there's always problems. So it's really nice, especially from a district point of view, that there's someone there that they can refer to. Quite often I hear, oh, but it sounds like a scam, it's too good to be true. So it's just nice to have that reassurance from somebody that they can believe in. So any more highlights than that, just have a quick look. Something I did want to mention, there's a highlight today that is hot off the press, and I've not even spoken to Neil about it yet, but I had a conversation earlier with Cambridge City about where we were as today in terms of delivery, and I have got a slide on that later, but from April to now, we've actually put through 73 properties, batched properties as SERP, which is really interesting when you look at the numbers further down the spreadsheet. This is just a little highlight summary, some pictures of what it is to bring it to life a little bit more. So on the side, I've been working on a retrofit guide, which is for our able to pay market. I think it's really important we don't neglect that. And also the guide is for everyone. It's also for those that are thinking about applying for funding, but maybe they're not quite sure what retrofit is. I have come up against a little bit of hurdle, which is when you go to Trustmark, which is the website where you check, it's like check a trade. There aren't actually any retrofit assessors in Cambridgeshire, so it's very difficult to signpost our residents to. But with that said, I have had an interesting conversation with Reed Environment on how we can overcome those hurdles in the future. The middle picture actually demonstrates a case study. A local resident from Pidley, who I've been really close to through this entire process. She's actually an elderly lady suffering with cancer. Until this year, her source of heating was to go to the garden, dig out the coal from the coal shed. She's 78, and heat her home. And I went to her house a few weeks ago with Ellie, and it was like an oven. It was so toasty and warm, and I've never met anyone so grateful and so happy that she actually applied for this funding. But with that said, something struck me, is when she said to me, I almost don't want to tell anyone about it because I feel a little bit like ashamed that I've had to apply for funding. And I thought there's got to be a piece of work there to try and remove that stigma for applying for funding. So there's so many hurdles we've got to overcome, but hopefully we'll get there. And with that said, I'm actually going to the Pidley Eco Fair on Sunday. So hopefully I'll get to speak to more of her neighbours and bring them round to the idea, because it's an off-gas area, which is just perfect for the Hug 2 scheme. Okay, so into the figures. So this is financial year 1 review. So you might look at this and you might think, oh, that's not that great. But when you look at it from a national perspective, it's actually really good. We're in the top 30%, I believe. My maths is not great, so don't quote me, of delivery. I have also included on this slide a report from Adept, which goes into in more detail, the real difficulties of delivering this scheme so far. But with that said, as I've just mentioned, that so far as a partnership, we've delivered 73 properties. So in the first year, yes, it was 89, but so far since April, we've done 73. So it's taken a year to really fine-tune the process and to understand the scheme. And we've worked closely with DESNZ to improve the scheme. So much so that the income parameters went from 34,000 to 36, and we're now pushing for 39. So this is, again, perfect demonstration of why it is so difficult in our area, because we're predominantly on gas. So our scheme is currently just for off gas. So it's not all doom and gloom though, because as you'll see as I progress, the next scheme will be targeting both. So it's good news. So as I mentioned, this is just a little recap. There's a new projected forecast total homes to be upgraded is 355, and I think we'll sail through that, to be fair. That is as SERP, not just as our area. Okay. So as I mentioned, future energy schemes, we're looking at the local authority retrofit scheme. At the moment, there's no guidance being released, but we do hope soon there'll be something. And again, that's for both on and off gas. So I'm hopeful that will be a really positive scheme for Huntingdonshire. Yeah. It did mention previously, so I've skipped the wrong way, the Lara project. So we're just waiting to news on whether we've been successful on that or not. And I just wanted to shamelessly plug the Climate Hub once again. And all of the information about the schemes can be found on the website, so that's very useful. And I'm going to shut up talking now and let you ask any questions.
So now I'm going to bring you back to the little business cards I've been handing to everyone, and just how important it is that we need all of the local members' help to get the message out, especially to rural residents who are heated by oil, because the only way we're going to be able to retrofit is if they know that the schemes are available and they have someone like Amber they can go to, so they realize it's not a scam and there is money out there that can help them.
Thank you, Amber, for your presentation. I could never have guessed that was your first one. It was really good. Well done. And I'm so glad it's you who's running this project, because you reach those people. Clearly, that elderly lady, it's how you were with her that made that impact. And I'm so glad it is you. Anyone got any comments? Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a text from one of the other councillors who's not on this panel saying the slides weren't visible on YouTube. So is it possible to add those to the YouTube link for? So, but would members of the public know that'd be great. The other question is, or the point I'd like to raise, it was quite a surprise looking through the report when it was referenced the 4 areas that were in particular fuel poverty, and I think it emphasises to me, I think the 2 of them were in Councillor Bywater's ward, I believe, that we take it for granted if we're on the grid that we've got gas, but a number of villages in my ward, Gidding and Home, aren't on the grid. They are oil only, and I think there are people out there that are easily forgotten, that do fall down the gap and get missed out on opportunities like this. And it wasn't to do with oil and poverty, but it was a reminder to me that not everyone does technology. I was talking to a resident in my ward, and I said, "Oh, can you email me about it?" So I've got the detail. Oh no, I don't do email. And it was a reminder to me that as technology moves on, to move with it, but not everybody else is. And the other thing that I felt a challenge was, I've looked at retrofitting solar panels on my own house, and talking to one of the neighbours who'd got them fitted, and she went, "Well, I don't know, I can't remember how it works or where we got it from." So I think that's a good thing. It's reassuring that I can go as a resident rather than a councillor and a resident and find out more, because even for someone who thinks they're reasonably tech savvy, I'm not sure what the best option is for me as a resident. So to have that option, I think, is good.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Amber, I think we thought about the possibility at some points of writing directly to residents that we thought, if we saw a scheme that we knew there's only maybe 200 people in Huntingdonshire that would be eligible, could we just write directly to them and let them know about that? What are your thoughts on that at the moment?
Yeah, it's on my to-do list, that's for sure. So what I have found is the structure of the letter and how it comes across. It's quite hard to, from a piece of paper, convince someone. It's the follow-up. It's what comes after that matters. So, yeah, but it is something that we do want to do.
I think we definitely recognize that portion of our population that don't use email, that won't know how to check online what they're eligible for, and sometimes they might be exactly the people that need the most help in this situation.
Anybody else got comments or questions? Councillor Mockball.
Thank you for your presentation. It's also my first meeting on this committee. So my question was for residents who are privately renting, so aren't homeowners. What funding is there for those, those people? Because if they meet they're not eligible, as in they've got enough finances, but they just barely make it. So I just wanted to see what you can do for those residents.
The Hug2 scheme is open to them, subject to the landlord agreeing, and there is a landlord contribution. So at the moment it is quite difficult, and if we link up at the end, I can pass you some more information. We can try and figure something out to help with that.
Councillor Bywater.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very good. Excellent. Well done for your first attempt. So, yeah, it was really good. So thank you, Amber. I guess I was a little bit surprised because Woodwalton is in my ward, actually, and, it's a very rural location. I was quite surprised, really, by that. And it is a dilemma we have going around our parish council meetings. Woodwalton, funny enough, is a well-attended parish council meeting. We get quite a few members of the public turning up. Again, it's the ones that are on this list that don't come to the parish council meetings. How do we reach them, really? So I'll be happy to work with you in relation to Woodwalton. If you think we need to go to the parish council and do a briefing there, or really just try and build up some confidence in the system, really, then I'd be more than happy to help you with that.
Shamelessly to plug Huntingdonshire Futures, which is something else that I'm involved with. We actually had a launch event with the community on Tuesday evening, and PECT, who are an organisation that support communities with energy and supports organisations like ours. And I was talking to an energy assessor, I was talking to a planner, and so we're constantly exploring, as Amber has said, both opportunities with our council, but also ways in which we can connect with solutions, and recognising that sometimes the officialdom can be a barrier in itself sometimes, can't it? So we are actively exploring ways in which we can reach out, and we're currently working on what we're calling the problem statement for Huntingdonshire in terms of that energy dilemma, where there are members of our community that might be in that horrible situation where that fuel cost is making it really, really difficult to live, but also the other opportunities as well. So one of the pieces of work around a home energy strategy we're picking up as well, so we'll bring that back in due course. But it's really interesting. We're going to have to get out there and ask people, because a lot of this information, the ratings for household energy, they're generally updated when houses are sold. So there's a lag in the information, all of that. So we may well be coming back to councillors, and it may even be something that the working group want to look at in terms of ways in which we can work differently in partnership with councillors to break down some of that connectivity, as you're saying. And, as we've tried with other things, it's good to have pilot areas to try and develop that and get lessons learned. And I just want to emphasise that when we're talking about the retrofit stuff, that's probably about a £40,000 investment in a house. So the numbers are small because the investment is large, but the amount of hand-holding, I would say, it's not just the resident, it's the supplier, because some of the restrictions and getting the grants through and everything is quite considerable. So it's been a significant learning curve for us. Amber's been brilliant in that process. And we'll be looking at ways to do things differently depending upon what the grants come up at as well. So we're very acutely aware of that and some of the challenges. So we'll bring back some more stuff on that. And, if the working group would like to, delve into how we can, have those conversations with communities, I think, Amber off her own is having that conversation. But if we can look at some other pilot areas, that would be really grateful.
Thank you. Can we just make a note of Becky, that working group? Thank you. Anyone else got any questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud now. Really, I think it's always a dilemma, isn't it? Really, just and how we reach out to those vulnerable people within our communities. But I do think I wouldn't feel confident enough to stand in front of a parish council and explain how to retrofit a house, and I'm not skilled enough and qualified enough to do that, because I can just picture it now, being in a parish council meeting on a cold Tuesday winter's night, getting bombarded by 101 questions by residents who want to engage in the process. But so I guess you're absolutely right. It's if we need to use a pilot scheme in Woodwalton, then let's try and do something really. So I think that'd be really good. So.
There's a new training centre in St Ives that can help you with that, Simon. But what I would say is perhaps we need to think first about where are those people who we want to inform. They might not be at the parish council meeting, and maybe we need to go to them and figure out where is the place where they are, and that the information is there. You're right, it is a really big challenge.
So if you indulge me, Chair, I think that those people who come, they're what we used to call community connectors. Those people who turn up at parish council meetings will go and talk to Mrs. Smith, who lives on a remote little village house somewhere. So it's just trickle feeding that information down into the community, in it really. But yeah, we'll do some more thinking, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think a working party would really, I've got a lot of ideas of that because I'm involved in a network meeting for the ageing population in St Ives, and we get at least 35 to 40 different agencies around the table every other month. So I think knowing the groups that show up and who reaches would be really helpful. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Motbull.
I'm happy to go door to door with you if you want to, if you need extra hands or whatever.
Thank you, Councillor Motbull. Any other comments or questions? In that case, thank you so much, Neil and Amber, and Councillor Davenport-Ray for this presentation. And that is the final agenda item. So thank you so much for your comments and contributions and some excellent presentations.